Welcome to Village Church Sermon Q&A. Pastor Michael here with you, and I'm in the studio with Pastor Craig Jarvis. And August, was it 22nd, Craig?
22nd, yes.
2021, we preached the fourth sermon on the tabernacle from the book of Exodus. And Craig, we've got a question for you on this one. No pressure, but we expect you to know what the Jews didn't know. You ready? All right. Did the Jews know for certain that the blood of bulls and goats didn't actually pay for their sin? I'm going to read a scripture, and then you can take the floor here.
All right.
Hebrews 10, verse 4 through 5. For it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Consequently, as a result, when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifices and offerings you have not desired, but a body you prepared me. So did they even know that this wasn't actually accomplishing full forgiveness of sins?
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I've wrecked my brain over this. I'm like, what did they actually know?
Some things that we know that they knew. They were obeying God.
Yep.
This is what God had planned for them. Moses had explained it. I mean, there are detail after detail for how all of these sacrifices went. And there were different sacrifices for different things. Ceremonial cleansing. There was sacrifice for sin offerings. So, and there were different things that could be sacrificed: bulls, doves, goats. I mean, all these different things could be sacrificed. Even peace offerings were with grain. You could do a grain offering. So there is a variety of offerings given to us in the Old Testament, and they take up an enormous amount of space.
Apparently they're important, whatever they are.
They are important.
So important that it's literally chapter after chapter.
Right.
The entire book is about really the
Right.
process of this stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you dig into each one had a specific purpose and was to be done a specific way. And the priests knew all about this. So these priests, who were overqualified butchers actually, knew exactly what pieces were to be taken out, what pieces went home with people, in their doggy bags so they could eat it later. I mean, it's really an amazing, and it's an amazing feat that they did all this. Now, did they know that this didn't take away their sins once and for all? Really hard to get into their minds to answer that. Yeah. I think all they knew is that they were obedient. Yeah. They were doing what God had asked them to do. And there was a reason for it, and they were doing it for the right reasons.
Yep. Pastor Alex and I disagreed on this with each other. Not like heated and emotional. Like we were like, no, I think they did. No, I think they didn't. And in my brain went back to Genesis, where Adam and Eve walked with God in the cool of the day. Yep. And I got to imagine that in their brain, this imagery has to be there, that even with this sacrificial system, it never gave them full access, and it never even lasted forever. It only seemed to last for maybe a day or a week, and it just had to keep happening over and over again. But even with someone who is pretty much ceremonially clean and purified and atoned, they still couldn't go into the Holy of Holies. No. And yet Adam and Eve—
in fact, they couldn't go into certain courtyards based on whoever they were.
Right. And Adam and Eve walked with God in the cool of the day. I don't know if they ever put it together that there's something deficient about these things that doesn't actually get us, what Moses had, which is weird to think. Like, actually, that's a whole different theological question that I have, which is—
he talked to God like a friend.
Right.
Face to face.
I mean, that's very strange to me. Almost like a reiteration of the Garden of Eden, walking with God in the cool of the day. So there's that. But they also had no developed what we call eschatology. That's a theology of the end times.
Right.
And I mean, as you read the Old Testament, their understanding of how the world's going to end and unfold grows over millennia, culminating with the book of Revelation, obviously. But they had no categories.
And they had no education. They're slaves that are brought out of Egypt. They're obviously uneducated. So it just— I don't think they had the information. I don't even know if they knew the stories of Adam and Eve. I mean, I'm sure they knew parts of it, but I don't even know if they knew all of that. All I know is in that verse that you just read in Hebrews, in the verse right before that, it says what they knew is that these sacrifices reminded them they had continual sins that needed to be forgiven. So the sacrifices were a reminder, it says in there in Hebrews 10, of their continual sin. So I think regardless if they knew that there was a Christ that was to come, that would be a sacrifice once and for all, which is the body that you referred to, regardless if they knew— all they knew, I think, that was important right now is that death postponed their sin. This death that they were engaging in, this death that they were engaging in postponed their death.
Yep.
So something was being covered. The word atonement obviously means covering. And so something was being covered. No one seemed to have access like Moses did. So I don't know if they ever put that together. Forgiveness was temporary. They had to do this over and over again. It wasn't permanent. So the things that we enjoy in Jesus Christ, the way that we have the Bible, we can look back on it. And we're in like the final couple of chapters here.
Yeah, right.
They're in the very beginning.
Totally.
So what they knew and what they didn't know, I think is hard to say. All I know that they knew is if they wanted to be right with God and have their sins atoned for, they were to do certain sacrifices at certain times of the year and be obedient.
Yep. There's so many things that when we look back on in our life and in Scripture, we think to ourselves, oh, how did I not see that coming?
Yeah.
Or if I could have done it differently, I would have done it differently, because in retrospect, everything's just so clear. And I imagine if all of the Jews that were alive right now were to look back, all the pieces are there. Oh yeah, why didn't I look back at the Garden of Eden? Why didn't I see that it only gave me limited access? Of course, there's got to go back to the Garden of Eden again, and there's going to be somebody who crushes the head of the serpent and all of the damages that he has caused. And in retrospect, it's so clear. But in the moment, in the process, the ability for any of us to put the pieces together, it's actually pretty challenging.
Well, I think actually you've answered your own question, because how many Jewish people today continue doing the Seder meal, Passover,
believing it has
and looking forward to something that is to come when that thing has already come in the person of Jesus Christ. So I think they just did it out of obedience, thinking this is what God was requiring of them. I don't know if they, but again, I can't speak for them, but I don't know if God enlightened them to know more than they actually did. All I know is that they were obedient. And it's interesting that faith saved them. It wasn't their sacrifices. It wasn't the blood of bulls and goats that saved them. It was the faith that they were to do what God intended for them to do in his storyline, knowing only what he wanted them to know at the time. And their obedience to that saved them. And it's the same for us today.
Yeah, wow. So in other words, two pastors sit behind a microphone and we don't really know the answer.
No.
We can surmise. Welcome to Bible teaching.
Indeed.
Indeed, it is its own challenge. We got more coming from Sermon Q&A. Thank you for joining us, and it is our joy to kind of go deeper into these really fun subjects.